When was the last time you used the quadratic formula? Or named all the bones in the human body? Or analyzed the symbolism in a poem you were forced to read at 14?
For most people, the answer is never. And yet we spent years learning these things. Hours of homework, weeks of revision, exams that felt like the end of the world.
And then we graduated, got jobs, started real lives, and realized that nobody, not once, has ever asked us to solve for X.
I'm Marcus.
And I'm Emma. And today we're asking the question every student has asked at least once. Why does school teach us things we never actually use?
Let's start with the uncomfortable truth. A huge portion of what we learned in school has never appeared in our adult lives, not even once.
I mean, I spent an entire year learning trigonometry, sine, cosine, tangent. I have not used that information a single time since my final exam.
Same with organic chemistry. I memorized molecular structures, reaction chains, the periodic table. I work in communications. None of it was relevant.
And it's not just the hard sciences. I memorized entire poems, dates of battles, the names of kings and queens from centuries ago, all gone, completely gone.
And here's what makes it frustrating. It wasn't just that the information wasn't useful. It was that learning took time away from things that might have been useful.
Exactly. Every hour spent on the quadratic formula was an hour not spent learning how to manage money or cook a proper meal or understand your own emotions.
There's actually research on this. Studies consistently show that most adults retain very little of the specific content they learned in school, particularly in subjects like advanced mathematics, sciences, and literature analysis.
Which raises the obvious question, what was the point?
And that's where it gets complicated, because there are two very different answers to that question.
Okay, but before we completely write off school, I want to talk about the other side, because I've had moments where something I learned completely unexpectedly saved me.
Like what?
Like what? Oh wait, that's my line. Okay, so percentages. I learned how to calculate percentages in school, obviously, very basic maths. And I remember thinking at the time, when am I ever going to use this? But now I use it constantly. At the supermarket, working out discounts, at a restaurant, calculating the tip, and especially, this is the one that really matters, working out tax at the checkout. I always know exactly what I'm going to pay, and I notice that a lot of people don't. They're genuinely surprised when the total comes up.
That's a perfect example. It's not the advanced maths that matters. It's the foundational stuff that becomes invisible because it's so woven into everyday life.
And here's another one. I studied Spanish at school, and honestly, I was terrible at it. I found it boring. I thought I'd never use it, but years later I met someone at a party. We got talking, she was from Spain, and because I had those few years of Spanish, not fluency, just the basics, we could connect in a way that wouldn't have been possible otherwise. She's now one of my closest friends. And I genuinely think, if I hadn't had those school lessons, that friendship might never have happened.
That's actually a really powerful example, because it shows that education doesn't always pay off in the way you expect. Sometimes it opens doors you couldn't have predicted.
Exactly. You don't know in advance which lessons will matter. You only see it looking back.
I have my own version of this. I studied Latin for 2 years, which I know sounds completely pointless. And at the time I thought it was. But understanding Latin roots has made me significantly better at understanding English vocabulary, medical terminology, legal language. It's quietly useful in ways I never expected.
So maybe the problem isn't that school teaches useless things. Maybe it's that school doesn't help us see how things connect to real life.
That's a really important distinction. The knowledge isn't always useless. It's the presentation that fails to make it relevant.
Okay, but here's where I do have a genuine complaint. Not about what school teaches, but about what it doesn't teach.
Go on.
Taxes, how to file a tax return, how tax brackets work, what deductions you can claim. This is something literally every adult has to deal with, and I left school with zero understanding of it. I had to figure it all out myself as an adult, and I made expensive mistakes along the way.
Same, and it's not just taxes, basic personal finance, how compound interest works, what a mortgage is, how to read a contract, how to negotiate a salary, things you will definitely need.
Or, and this one feels really important, mental health. How to recognize when you're struggling, how to ask for help, how to manage stress and anxiety. These are survival skills, and most schools don't touch them at all.
First aid is another one. Basic medical knowledge. what to do in an emergency, how to recognize signs of a heart attack or stroke. These are things that could genuinely save someone's life.
And practical life skills: how to cook, how to budget, how to rent an apartment, what to look for in a contract, what your rights are as a tenant, how to write a professional email, things that seem basic but nobody actually teaches you.
I think the frustrating thing is schools teach to a curriculum that was designed decades ago, and the world has changed enormously. The skills needed for modern life are very different from the skills needed in the 1970s when a lot of these curricula were designed.
And updating a national curriculum is incredibly slow and politically complicated. So we end up with this strange situation where kids are learning things that were relevant 50 years ago, while not learning things that are essential right now.
Though I will say, some schools are getting better at this. There are schools now that teach financial literacy, emotional intelligence, coding, entrepreneurship. It's not universal, but it's happening.
Which is hopeful, but it shouldn't be a lottery depending on which school you happen to attend.
Okay, so here's the philosophical question underneath all of this. What is school actually for?
Because there are two very different answers. One answer is, school is for transferring specific knowledge and skills that you'll use in life, in which case a lot of what we learned was a failure.
But the other answer is, school is for teaching you how to learn, how to concentrate, how to work through difficult problems, how to receive and respond to feedback, how to manage time and deadlines.
And if that's the goal, then maybe the specific content matters less than the process.
Exactly. Learning trigonometry might not give you useful mathematical knowledge, but working through, something difficult and abstract and eventually understanding it teaches you something about your own capacity to learn.
I find that argument partially convincing, but also a little too convenient. Like, if the real goal was to teach us how to think, couldn't we do that with more relevant content?
That's fair. Why not teach critical thinking through financial decisions? Why not teach concentration through something that actually matters to young people?
I think the honest answer is, school serves many purposes at once: childcare, socialization, knowledge transfer, civic education. And when you try to do everything, you do none of it perfectly.
Which doesn't mean we shouldn't try to do it better.
Okay, Marcus, if you could change or add one thing to the way school works, what would it be?
One thing, that's hard, but I think I'd make financial literacy mandatory from an early age. Not just how to count money, but how money actually works in the real world. Interest rates, debt, savings, investment, the basics of building a financially stable life. Because the cost of not knowing this stuff is enormous, and it falls hardest on people who don't have families to teach them.
That's a really good one. What about you? What do you think I'd say?
Probably something about emotional intelligence.
You know me well. Yes, I would make emotional literacy a core subject. How to identify what you're feeling, how to communicate difficult emotions, how to manage conflict, how to support someone who is struggling. We teach kids about the world outside themselves, but almost nothing about the world inside themselves. And I think that gap causes enormous suffering that is completely preventable.
Two very different answers, but both completely valid. And now, what about you watching this?
Yes, we want to know. If you could change or add just one thing to the education system, what would it be? Tell us in the comments. We genuinely want to know.
There are no wrong answers, just honest ones.
And if this episode made you think about your own education differently, that's exactly what we were hoping for. Subscribe for more Real Talk English. New episode every week.
See you next time.
Bye, everyone.